Among the many figures who, throughout history, have shaped the philosophical, existential, and spiritual fabric of humanity, few stand out with the same symbolic and intellectual density as Solomon, the king of Israel. His memory transcends the boundaries of biblical narrative and enters the realm of philosophy, where questions of existence, morality, and the meaning of life find their rawest and most disturbing expression. Considered the wisest man in the Holy Scriptures, Solomon was not only a king who ruled with incomparable splendor, but also a thinker whose existential restlessness led him to produce one of the most provocative and philosophically unsettling texts in the Judeo-Christian tradition, the Book of Ecclesiastes. Right from its opening, Solomon throws us into an abyss of reflection with the famous and melancholic statement, "Vanity of vanities, all is vanity." This phrase, repeated throughout the work, is not a mere poetic lament, but an existential cry that echoes through the centuries as a denunciation of the futility of all human achievements. Wealth, pleasures, knowledge, power, all the modern and ancient idols of personal fulfillment are, in the eyes of the wise king, as ephemeral as the breath of wind at dawn. The original Hebrew term used by Solomon is hevel, a word whose literal translation refers to concepts such as vapor, mist, fleeting breath. Here, vanity does not refer to narcissistic pride, but to the transient and illusory essence of human existence. It is the realization that every human search for meaning resembles the attempt to grasp fog with one's hands, an effort doomed to failure. Modern and contemporary philosophers, even separated by millennia, share this fundamental anguish with Solomon. Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus, leading figures of existentialism, deeply examined the same absence of inherent meaning that pervades life. Camus, in his famous essay The Myth of Sisyphus, compared the human condition to the fate of the character condemned to push a rock up a mountain, only to see it roll back down eternally. Solomon, with the sobriety of his time, reached a similar conclusion. Man works, accumulates, conquers. But everything dissipates like smoke. There is also a profound echo between Solomon's thought and Buddhist philosophy, especially in the principle of impermanence. In Buddhism, everything is transient. Everything passes. Attachment is the source of suffering, and the obsession with possessing, knowing, or controlling only amplifies the soul's anguish. Solomon, in perceiving the vanity of everything man desires, exposes this same dynamic. Fixation on material goods, fleeting pleasures, or even profound knowledge does not lead to true fulfillment. Friedrich Nietzsche, with his theory of eternal recurrence, brought to Western philosophy a question that seems to dialogue directly with Solomon's perplexity. What if everything we live has already happened before and is destined to repeat infinitely? Nietzsche presents the human spirit with a test of greatness, to live in such a way that if life had to be repeated eternally, it would still be worth it. Solomon, however, contemplates the cycle of existence with a more melancholic gaze, seeing not an opportunity for redemption, but a condemnation to sterile repetition. Beyond metaphysical observations, Solomon bitterly notes the impermanence of human memory. Mighty kings turn to dust. Once glorified empires disappear into the silence of history. Entire civilizations are reduced to footnotes in books that no one reads anymore. Man, no matter how grandiose, is nothing more than a grain of sand carried by the winds of time. Even when we try to break the cycle through sensory satisfaction, we find another trap. Solomon, in his desperate search for meaning, surrendered himself to the most intense pleasures the world could offer. He built palaces, erected monumental gardens, accumulated wealth, surrounded himself with concubines, rejoiced with wine and music. Yet, at the end of this hedonistic journey, the conclusion was the same. Behold, this also was vanity. Here, modern psychology offers an additional lens, the phenomenon of hedonic adaptation, in which, after a brief period of euphoria following a conquest or pleasure, the human being returns to their emotional baseline, perpetuating the cycle of dissatisfaction. In seeking solace and wisdom, Solomon encountered an even crueler paradox. The more knowledge he acquired, the deeper his sadness grew. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. A bitter irony of the human condition. To know more is to suffer more. Socrates already intuited this agony when he said that true wisdom consists in recognizing how little we know. Nietzsche, in turn, criticized the illusion of absolute truth, pointing out that every search for ultimate meaning is a human construction destined to collapse. Faced with this existential abyss, Solomon proposes a solution that might, at first glance, seem a regression to dogmatism. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. But the fear he refers to is not a servile fear, but a deep reverence, a consciousness of one's finitude before a mystery greater than human reason can comprehend. This conclusion can be read through multiple philosophical lenses. For Søren Kierkegaard, a leading figure of Christian existentialism, man only transcends the despair of existence by taking the leap of faith, recognizing that the meaning of life cannot be fully rationalized, but must be experienced in relation to the absolute. Stoicism, in turn, represented by Seneca and Marcus Aurelius, teaches us that accepting what is beyond our control and living with virtue and purpose are the only paths to true inner peace. Solomon, by closing Ecclesiastes, does not offer us a simplistic answer or a magical antidote against nihilism. His greatest gift is perhaps the invitation to reflection. He forces us to face the brutality of existence, to admit the fragility of our efforts, and to recognize that, in the end, every human construction rises on foundations of sand. It remains for each of us to choose how to respond to this call, with faith, with reason, with acceptance, or with the courage to seek a new meaning, even if it may never be fully found. Solomon's greatest legacy is perhaps the open and dead question he leaves us. If all is vanity, then what, after all, truly matters? And so, after this long and painful journey through Solomon's existential reflections, one inevitable question lingers. If everything is vanity, what truly remains? If you've made it this far, it means that, like Solomon, you too carry within yourself this thirst for answers, this burning desire to understand the deepest mysteries of existence. And that's exactly why I want to make you a sincere invitation. It's almost like a silent pact between truth seekers. Subscribe to this channel. Here together we'll continue exploring the great philosophical, spiritual, and existential dilemmas that have crossed the centuries and still echo in our hearts today. Each video is a new stage of this journey, another chance to find better questions and perhaps some answers that make sense to you. So, if this resonated with your soul, if at any point in this video you felt that shiver down your spine, that inner restlessness that only great reflections provoke, click the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join me as we uncover the next layers of this grand theater called life. Because, in the end, perhaps the greatest vanity of all is to live without reflection. See you in the next video.